You're listening to In the Balance, the Iowa Judicial Branch podcast. Welcome to In the Balance, a podcast dedicated to exploring Iowa Judicial Branch, and I'm your host, Abhash Shrestha. Today, we're talking about grant programs that help fund organizations that provide legal assistance to low-income Iowans with civil legal problems. Our guest is Jessica Taylor, Director of Board and Commission for the Office of Professional Regulations, which oversee the grant program. Welcome to In the Balance, Jessica.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming here, and we have a lot of questions regarding IOLTA and its grants and how it helps people of Iowa. So, first of all, let's get started with the definition. What is IOLTA?
Yeah, so IOLTA is the Interest on Lawyers Trust Account. That's what IOLTA stands for, and it's a program that generates funding for nonprofit organizations who provide civil legal services. So those funds are generated from interest on pooled trust accounts of attorneys.
And how does professional regulation support IOLTA programs?
Yeah, so our office administers many of the Iowa Supreme Court's boards and commissions, and the IOLTA program is under the Lawyers Trust Account Commission.
Mhm.
So that's one of the commissions that we work with to oversee the IOLTA program. And I can explain a little bit about how the IOLTA program works. So attorneys often handle money that belongs to their clients. And if that amount of money is large,
Mhm.
or if it's going to be held for a long time, then attorneys will place the funds into interest-bearing trust accounts for the benefit of their clients. But more often than not, it's a small amount of money for a single client. So small enough that or it's held for a short period of time. And this means that those small amounts of money can't really earn enough interest for the client that would be enough to cover the amounts charged by the bank to collect the interest. So traditionally, lawyers have placed these deposits into pooled trust accounts that contained
Mhm.
other nominal or short-term client funds. And prior to the 1980s, these pooled trust accounts earn no interest. So, and this is because of banking laws, but prior to 1980, the checking accounts, which is what these usually are, could not earn interest before a banking law change in 1980. But after that law changed, then the IOLTA programs were established across the country. And in fact, they're now in all 50 states, DC, Puerto Rico, and a number of other countries. So Iowa's IOLTA program was created in 1985.
And how much in overall interest collection usually happen in average per year?
It really depends on the year. Of course, it's really, determined by the market and how it's doing. So this year's been a pretty good year. We were able to award, I think the total was over 800,000.
Okay.
And so, but the generation has, it kind of depends on how much is generated, how much people apply for. But typically, I think in good years, around 1 million.
That's really awesome. And are all of those funds going towards the nonprofits, people who request for the grants, or are they subjected to different categories?
Yeah, so they are designated for nonprofit organizations who provide civil legal services, so no criminal services,
Mhm.
or law-related education, and those types of things. So that's really the purpose, is to, help low-income Iowans with access to justice.
So, in regards to getting the benefit from the IOLTA, what kind of services do people get from those grants through the nonprofit?
So civil legal services is the biggest type of grant that we award, or that the court awards, and then we see. So for instance, I can talk about the programs.
Yeah.
A couple of the programs that this year, that we have seen apply for and receive awards. One is Iowa Legal Aid, and that is the biggest award this year. And most years, it's one of the biggest, or the biggest nonprofit civil legal services provider in Iowa. They
Mhm.
have 10 offices in Iowa, and they serve all 99 counties. They provide civil legal services to low-income Iowans. That can include anything from housing to domestic violence, protection orders, family law, consumer law, unemployment. So they received a grant this year of $437,900.
Mm.
Um, they also have a hotline for older Iowans, which is a separate grant. So they're the only organization that has two different grants, because they have two different programs within their organization that receives this funding. So the hotline for older Iowans received 65,500. They provide free legal advice, brief services, and referrals to any Iowan 60 or older. And on the types of law that affect older Iowans. So healthcare, housing, elder abuse, nursing home, those kinds of things.
Feels like those services are really important. Are those nonprofit organizations that request grant, like Iowa Legal Aid, do they have multiple grants request, or is it one organization, one grant?
Most of the time, it's one organization, one grant. We have seen, like with Iowa Legal Aid, and I think some other programs in the past where, if they may have a special program that or a new program they've started, they may apply for separate funding. But typically, it's one organization, one grant.
Okay. And how many different organizations usually do apply for those grants? And what would you say, like how many do get it and how many don't?
Yeah, this year there were 13 organizations. Iowa Legal Aid being the one, so there were 14 grants total. Um, I would say most of the time, it's a lot of people who have received grant funding in the past. So a lot of the organizations apply year after year, which is great. We want to see organizations that are consistent and in the community and they're providing services, and we want to certainly help them continue that. We do see new programs as well. So, for instance, this year we had an application from a smaller organization called La Luz Centro Cultural, and they received a grant of $30,020. They serve five counties in northern Iowa. So a smaller regional office, but and smaller staff. So they provide immigration assistance, anything from naturalization, citizenship to work permits to permanent residency. They're smaller, like I said, and they have non-attorneys who are certified by the Department of Justice to provide certain limited legal services to in immigration law.
So you do often get various organizations, as you said, like 13 different nonprofits applied for the grants. Who actually approves those grants for these nonprofits?
Yeah, the way it works is the applications come into our office every year. They can apply, the organizations can apply for funding with applications due on January 31st. And then we review them internally. So myself and a couple others here on OPR staff review the applications and we write up summaries for each application. At the April meeting of the Lawyers Trust Account Commission, they will review our summaries. They review the grants to see, how much each organization should receive, which one should receive the grant funding. Then what that commission does is makes their recommendation to the court, to the Iowa Supreme Court. The court then reviews the recommendations of the commission,
Mhm.
and they can either take those recommendations and award what the commission has recommended, but they're certainly not bound by that. Um, and that usually happens in late May or early June. And then the grant period starts. It's a fiscal year starting July 1st.
So, when deciding about which grants are important and how much impact does it make towards I-1 of specific region, I guess few counties or overall throughout the state, what would be the major consideration that is taken of how much grant is provided?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the commission actually uses a three-step process, really. They take a look at and calculate the anticipated available amount of funding. So, I mean, realistically, our office does that. And, we let the commission
Mm.
members know, here's how much money we're looking at for this year. Then they and we review the grant applications and determine which programs that have applied should receive funding. After that, then they would determine how much funding each organization should receive.
And have you had response from people who had been awarded these grants and how much impact it had actually provided? What has been the ground level response so far?
Yeah, we certainly hear back from the organizations who say, thank you for this funding because we are going to be able to expand our services to reach more people, serve more people in Iowa who need it. In fact, when I sent out the email a few weeks ago after the court approved these, and I did get individual responses saying, this is wonderful. We're going to hire one more attorney or, one more support staff so we can expand our program this year. So it's great to hear that these funds go to expansion of already existing programs and new programs who are doing things that other organizations might not be doing.
For people impacted and could be using those grants, how would they be able to know they could be applying for the grants through those nonprofits? How would they get hold of those nonprofits? Yeah.
So a lot of times they, an organization like Iowa Legal Aid is pretty big and pretty well known, but not always. So a lot of times people will hear either word of mouth, or from a service provider. So if they're receiving some type of services, they may say, hey, you have a legal problem, you should call Iowa Legal Aid or one of these other organizations who might be able to help you. Friends and family are always that word of mouth, I think, is a way that a lot of people hear about these organizations.
Mhm.
So a variety of ways.
I've heard about Iowa Coalition Against Sexual Assault nonprofit. Could you explain to me a little bit about those kind of organization, how they have impacted and how they use their grants?
Yeah, so they are a program that has received funding over the years, and this year they received $58,000. So the Iowa Coalition Against Sexual Assault is a coalition of Iowa's 24 sexual assault programs. So they provide services to sexual assault survivors across the state. So their member programs are all part of this coalition. And then their legal team provides civil legal services to survivors of sexual assault. So that can include, again, protective orders, family law representation, and other types of civil legal services. The other thing they do is education for attorneys and judges on legal options for survivors, as well as trauma-informed representation. So knowing how to work with someone who's been a victim of sexual assault.
Those
Mhm.
are really important,
Yeah.
and I hope they are making a big impact. For nonprofits that are interested in applying for those grants, how would the review board qualify an organization that could be getting those grants?
Yeah, the nice thing about the IOLTA grants is that it is, as far as the definition of what qualifies, is civil legal services. Um, so it's pretty broad. So it has to be nonprofit, right? It has to be nonprofit civil legal services. So you have to be a 501(c)(3) organization. But I would suggest if, someone has not heard of the program or has never applied and you think, we're providing civil legal services, maybe we should apply. Everything is on our website. The application form is out there. It's a pretty straightforward process. So I would encourage anyone to try it if they've never tried it before. If you have questions about it, we're always open to answering those. So give us a call or an email and we can help you through the process.
Say in conclusion, what does the IOLTA impact really been for the people of Iowa?
IOLTA in Iowa has been around for 40 years now, and it's given away $26 million over those 40 years, which is pretty awesome. It's a really innovative and unique way to use money that really uses no tax dollars, costs nothing for attorneys or their clients, and the benefit to Iowans is huge. It's really addressing an access to justice issue. So I think it's a great kind of win-win program for Iowans.
Oh, thank you, Jessica, for explaining the IOLTA grant program and what a big difference it makes in the lives of people of Iowa. This is an important program, and you provided a great deal of information to our listeners. Thank you all for tuning in to our podcast. We will return next month with another informative topic. Until then, thank you for listening to In the Balance.